Imagine this. You spend your entire life trying to fit in. You shape your speech, your clothes, your choices, all in search of approval. You bow to expectations that aren't even yours, and little by little, you drift away from who you really are. You fear being judged. You seek validation in looks that change with each season and cling to the idea that your worth depends on how the world sees you. But what if everything you were taught about caring too much is actually? What is stopping you from living? And what if the key to confidence, to freedom, and even to success isn't in control, but in letting go of control? Michel de Montaigne, a thinker from the 16th century, explored this paradox deeply. While the world around him crumbled in wars, he withdrew to a quiet tower, not to escape, but to observe the human soul. His essays didn't seek to indoctrinate, but to liberate. And his philosophy, far from being abstract, is a compass for those who wish to live with lightness, authenticity, and inner peace. Montaigne challenged what we understand as success, questioned the need to please, and pointed to a path of serenity, detachment. In this video, we will walk down this path. We will look at the anxiety of pleasing, the fear of failure, the addiction to control. And with Montaigne as our guide, we will discover what happens when you simply stop caring about what never truly mattered. From an early age, we are taught to believe that if we control everything, we will be safe. Safe from error, from judgment, from failure. As if life were an exact equation, and all it took was effort, planning, and worry to keep everything in order. But Montaigne, observing the human condition with serene and clear eyes, saw something that few have the courage to admit. Control is, for the most part, a fantasy. We live in a constant attempt to dominate the uncontrollable, what others think, what could happen, how we will be perceived. And in this Herculean effort, we waste our most vital energy, the energy that could be directed towards creation, presence, and love. Montaigne almost died in a horseback accident, and this experience confronted him with the absolute fragility of life. He understood that no planning, no precaution, no obsessive worry could have saved him from that chance. And paradoxically, it was at that moment that something lit up in his soul. To live is not to control. To live is to accept the flow. He wrote, "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." This simple phrase disarms an entire modern mindset. How many anxieties do you carry for scenarios that never came to be? How many nights have you lost trying to predict the future or correct the past? How many dialogues have you rehearsed in your mind, hoping to control reactions that never came? The truth is that the effort for control distances us from reality. It prevents us from listening to what life is saying right now. And ironically, the more we try to hold the reins, the more unstable everything seems to become. Montaigne invites us to look at this obsession with tenderness and then gently let it go. Because life, at its essence, is not a machine to be operated. It is a living organism, full of surprises, and only flourishes for those who have the courage to dance with the unpredictable. There is an invisible force that silently guides many of our steps, the desire to be accepted. Since childhood, we have learned that approval is a reward, a look of pride, a compliment, a nod of belonging. And so, little by little, we start to build our identity around what pleases others. But Michel de Montaigne observed with sharp precision that this path leads to an inner labyrinth. Because when we live for the acceptance of others, we lose touch with what is truly ours. He wrote to understand himself, not to convince. He didn't seek applause, but authenticity. And perhaps that's why his texts resonate so deeply even today. Because Montaigne had the rare courage to think for himself in a world that screamed for conformity. The search for validation is subtle, almost imperceptible. It's in the choice of clothes, in the omission of an opinion, in the constant adaptation to the environment. We don't want to bother, we don't want to disappoint, but by avoiding the discomfort of the other, we put ourselves in a prison. And the most tragic thing is that this validation, when it finally comes, does not satisfy us. Because it was not directed to our true self, but to the mask we wear to be accepted. Montaigne proposes another way, the way of knowing yourself so well, of accepting yourself so fully, that the opinion of others loses the power to hurt or shape you. He invites us to ask, who are you trying to please and why? How many decisions in your life, professional, emotional, existential, have been made out of fear of judgment and not from true desire. When you stop seeking acceptance everywhere, you discover something rare and precious, self-acceptance. And from there, relationships become more honest, decisions lighter, and life more quietly yours. Contrary to what many think, detachment is not coldness, it is not indifference, apathy, or escape from life. Detachment is clarity. It is the wisdom of distinguishing between what deserves our energy and what only consumes us. It is knowing when to let go, not because we don't care, but because it is no longer worth holding on to. Michel de Montaigne understood this paradox deeply. He observed how people lived attached to results, expectations, and idealized images of themselves, and how this generated constant tension, corrosive anxiety. He did not propose renouncing life, on the contrary, but to live with lightness, to act with dedication but without obsession, to love without possessiveness, to seek without getting lost along the way. In his retreat, Montaigne wrote, "Not out of obligation, but out of curiosity, not to be recognized, but to understand myself." And it is in this space of non-compulsive effort, in this creative void, that the soul flourishes. How many times in your life have you achieved something precisely when you stop forcing it, when you stop trying to convince, impress, conquer? It's as if the universe responds to surrender with harmony. This is the paradox of detachment. The less you need to prove, the more natural your presence becomes. The less you try to control, the more things align on their own. And it's not about luck, it's presence. It's coherence between what you feel, think, and do. It's the magnetism of someone who doesn't beg for acceptance because they've already found a home within themselves. Montaigne teaches us that detachment is, in fact, a form of power, a serene, silent power that does not impose but transforms. When you let go of the weight of pleasing, of controlling, of appearing perfect, you become light enough to walk with freedom and firm enough to be who you truly are. Montaigne was not an ascetic nor a tragic hero. He was a man deeply aware of his flaws, and perhaps that is why he was so wise. He lived significant losses, the death of 5 of his 6 children in infancy, the premature death of his best friend Étienne de la Boétie, and the political and social collapse of a France in civil war. Pain and disillusionment did not make him cynical. They made him more real. Instead of hardening, he chose to withdraw, left politics, distanced himself from positions of power, and retreated to his tower, a space of silence, books, meditation. There, between the wooden corridors and the Latin phrases inscribed on the ceiling of his library, he began what he would call the study of himself, not to exalt himself, but to accept himself. In his essays, Montaigne exposes his soul with rare honesty. He confesses his vanities, his weaknesses, his fears, his inconsistencies. And it is precisely this vulnerability that makes him universal. He wrote, "I do not retract entirely, only as I see myself at this moment." This phrase carries a liberating truth. No one is constant, no one is perfect, and everything is in motion. Accepting this is to abandon the armor. It is to stop portraying an ideal version of oneself and finally inhabit your own humanity. In the present world, where everyone seems to compete for an image of success, coherence, and perfection, Montaigne emerges as an antidote. He reminds us that to be human is to contradict oneself, that changing one's mind is a sign of inner life, and that accepting imperfection does not weaken us, it frees us. By stopping demanding an unattainable ideal from oneself, you allow the real to manifest, the lightness of error, the beauty of doubt, the peace of simply being. And so Montaigne gives us one of the most healing lessons of philosophy. Wisdom does not come from perfection, but from intimacy with one's own imperfection. If there is a field where detachment reveals its true strength, it is in human relationships. Montaigne, with his deep and disillusioned gaze, observed how we become prisoners of one another, not out of true love, but out of fear of rejection, of loneliness, of not being enough. How many times have you tried to mold someone to your image, How many times have you been frustrated because the other didn't meet an expectation they might not have even known existed? The philosopher understood that relational suffering does not arise from the difference between people, but from our attempt to control, imprison, correct. In his work, he wrote tenderly about his friendship with Lavoisier, a connection that didn't demand, didn't charge, just was. Friendship free from possessiveness was for Montaigne a revelation of what is possible when you love someone without trying to possess them. He proposes a rare ideal: relationships based on presence, not on demands, on giving, not on control. And here's the paradox. The more you try to hold someone, the more they slip away. But the more you allow the other to be, the more they choose to stay. Freedom in relationships does not mean the absence of bond, but the refusal to turn the other into a mirror of your insecurities. Montaigne teaches us that the true meeting between two souls happens when both walk side by side, not out of obligation, but by choice. And this freedom is magnetic. It generates respect, admiration, depth. It attracts not by force, but by lightness, not by control, but by authenticity. Ask yourself, how many of your relationships are based on the fear of losing and not on the joy of sharing? The answer may hurt, but it can also set you free. There is a silent moment, almost imperceptible, in which something inside of us simply lets go. It is not surrender, it is not weakness. It is a kind of wisdom that does not come from reason, but from a sacred exhaustion. It is the moment when you realize that you cannot control everything, that you don't need to prove yourself all the time, that carrying so many worries makes no sense at all. Montaigne knew this moment well, and it is from there that his philosophy flourishes. Surrender not as renunciation, but as reconciliation with life. He did not propose passivity, but action free from anguish, an engaged life, but unburdened by guarantees. He understood that there is a deep peace that only arises when we stop resisting the impermanence of the world. And this peace is revolutionary, because by letting go of control, you become lighter. And with this lightness, you see better, act more clearly, and become receptive to the unexpected. What happens when you stop caring about what others think? You speak with more truth. What happens when you stop seeking perfection? You act with more courage. And when you let go of the fear of failing, you make space to create, love, and live. Surrender for Montaigne was not escape, it was presence. It was stopping the war against reality and starting to dance with it. 1528. And here is the greatest of paradoxes. The less you try to control life, the more it starts to align. Perhaps because in this state of surrender, you finally become who you are, and the world responds to this truth with harmony. Montaigne left us a silent legacy, not of rules, formulas, or certainties, but of a more whole presence before life. He taught us that the obsession with control is the opposite of freedom, that the constant effort to please others is the greatest enemy of authenticity, and that the fear of failing is often the only real obstacle between us and what we wish to live. Throughout this journey, we saw that detachment is not abandonment, it is trust. It is stepping off the stage and allowing life to reveal its choreography. And here is the most beautiful mystery of all. When you stop caring about what doesn't matter, what does matter starts to bloom. When you let go of fear, courage comes. When you let go of the need to prove, the silent power of simply being comes. Montaigne does not ask us to change the world. He invites us to change the way we inhabit ourselves. And when this happens, the world around us also changes. And you, what are you still holding on to so tightly that it has already started hurting you? What could happen if you, for a moment, just let go? Share in the comments an experience of yours with detachment, with the act of letting go. Perhaps by sharing your story, you will help others.
Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like and a subscription. If you could keep listening to the video until now, congratulations. You are a warrior who have the capacity of bringing attention for a long time. Leave a comment saying this: I'm brave. Then you will let people know that you have the brave to improve your life quality, and you'll try to be better each day. Now bye until the next video. A big hug from the being of knowledge.